Right now, when we attack enemies, they just kind of disappear and they don't have any animation to show that they're dying. And that's kind of boring. So that's what we'll do next, where we'll add a defeated animation for the enemy. So first thing we'll do is open up the enemy blueprint and we'll go back to the event graph. And over here in the defeated function, we'll move this a little bit and we'll get the mesh over here. And from here, we'll do a montage. And we'll connect it to the defeated and then connect to the timeline play. Press play and compile. But right now we don't have any montage for the enemy. So we'll go back to the enemy folder and open up the animations folder. And over here, we'll right click on the death animation, create an anim montage. Press enter. And we'll go back to the enemy blueprint and we'll put that in here. Save and compile. And now we'll try to defeat the enemy. But as you can see, it's not really showing anything. And that's because we're defeating it too quickly and we don't get to see anything. So before we start the timeline, we'll actually add a small delay here. And we'll put it to the length of the animation. And if we go to the animation and we check actually, the length is 0.45. So that's what we'll put the duration as, 0.45. And we'll save, compile, and then press play. And now when we go and we hit them, there's still an issue where we'll fix this by going back to the montage. And by the way, you see this magnifying button here, a magnifying glass button here. If you click that, it will actually go straight to the item that you pressed on. And you can actually use this for any kind of thing. So if you go to here and you have this skeletal mesh of the monster, you can click on this magnifying glass here too, and it will go straight to the item. So this is a quick way to go to something you want to see. So we'll go back here and we'll go to the montage by clicking on this and then opening the montage. And here we have two settings we need to change. Firstly, the blend in time is set to 0.25. And that's basically a blend in where it blends from the initial current animation that the enemy is on to this animation. And it will actually take up time from the current animation as well. And that's why it's taking up too much of it. And so we'll put it to 0, where it will immediately start to play this animation. And next, another thing is it's also blending out. And it's blending out like a second before the animation ends, which actually starts immediately because the animation is less than 1 second. So we want to disable this too. So we'll tick off the enable auto blend out, and we'll do that to false. And then we save. And now press play, and we try to go hit the enemy. We still have an issue actually, it's not playing. And one reason for that, we go back to the enemy folder and we open up the enemy animation blueprint. And we go to the anim graph. And over here, we don't have any default slot. And so we add one. And this will enable montages to work. So we save, compile. And now when we press play, and we hit the enemies, now we get a nice animation. Yeah, that's much better. But we have an issue right now where when we go and hit the enemy, they still continue moving. And we don't want that to happen. So we'll close these windows and we go back to the enemy blueprint. And over here, we'll move things again. And we'll get the self reference for the blueprint. And from that, we'll get the AI controller. And then get that. And we'll move things once again here. This will happen a lot, by the way, where you have to keep moving things a bit. And from this, we'll get the stop movement. And this will basically stop the AI movement and not make it continue going. And now when we save, compile, and press play, and we go and hit the enemies, they stop. And we get a nice defeated animation. Now, one last thing we want to add is that we want to actually push the enemy away from the player when he gets hit, so that there's a kind of an impact of the sword slash. So let's move things a bit back here. And let's add a launch character, just like we did for the player when he was bouncing off enemies when he stomps them. But in this case, we want to use it to push the enemy away from the player. We'll click on XY override and Z override. And for now, we'll just put the Z to 500 and press play. And now when we go and hit enemies, they kind of just fly into the air. It looks funny, but it's not exactly how we want it to be, because we want them to get pushed away. So we'll need to do a bit of a complex calculation where we check where the player is and we check where the enemy is, and based on that, push the enemy away from the player. So let's move things a little bit more back, because this will be a long formula we're going to have to do. And so first we will get the player pawn, and this will get the player, and from it we'll get the actor location. This will be the position of the player. Next, we'll get the location of the enemy by also getting the get actor location. And from this, we'll call get unit direction. And then we connect the player one to from, and then the enemy one to. And this will get us the direction that we want. But if we connect that now to the launch velocity and press play, you won't really see much happening, because the direction will just be kind of a small number like 1. And we want it to be multiplied. We can actually show that here if we print it. So we print string. And by the way, print string is not only for text. You can actually just put in any variable through here and check it. So this is very useful for debugging a lot of problems. So now if I hit him, you can see in the top left corner the velocity. And it's very low, as you can see. And we want it to be high. So one way you can do that is to... Let's reconnect things here. Let's push things a bit back again. And we can basically multiply this. So we look for multiply. And you can multiply it with a vector. But we can actually right-click on this and choose a float. So that way you can just multiply the whole vector with one float. And we can just put 1,000 here and connect that. And now when we hit them, they're getting pushed back, but not really good. And that's because they're also getting pushed back downwards, and that's creating friction with the ground, and we don't want that. So that's why actually first, before we multiply, we'll have to split the vector. So we'll do this by breaking the vector into 3 separate floats. And basically we want to remove the z-axis. And so next what we can do is draw from this and make a vector. And so we can connect the x and y. And this is one way to basically zero out one of the vectors. In our case, we want to zero out the z vector. And we pull this back again. And now again, if we do the whole multiplying thing with the float, and then select 1000, and connect that, it will be a little bit better. As you can see, it's pushing him back. But we also want to push them upwards. And this is where we'll change the z value here to 0.5. So it gets multiplied by that. And we press play. And now they get pushed upwards. But actually now I'm realizing it's a little bit too high to have it at 1000. So go back and make it 500. And save, compile, and play now. And now when we hit the enemies, they get very nicely pushed away. That's nice. One final thing we want to do is what's happening right now is we're actually hitting them twice sometimes, because this is running several times when the sword is overlapping with it. So one thing you can do with functions that should only run once, like the defeated function, is you can call a do once function. And this basically will make sure to only run this function once. So this can run more than one time, but then once it flows through here, this will check if it's the first time. If it is, it will let it go through and execute the function. But if it's a second time or more, it will actually not let it go through. And so this way the function will only run once. And now when we save and compile and press play, and we hit the enemy, it's only happening once. And it's all very correctly working. One final thing is we will take the entire function and we'll keep things organized by putting it all into a comment. So we'll put C and then call it defeated. And then we save and compile. And yeah, that's it for this lesson.